Welcome to another episode of Hub City Presents. I'm Kris Leonhardt from Hub City Times, and today we're here with Kathleen Meyer and Julie Salamonski from E.N.C. Incorporated. Everyone needs a community. And Kathy and Julie are two board members. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Kathleen Meyer. I'm currently president of the board of E.N.C. Incorporated. I have a 25-year-old son with autism, which is why I'm as aware as I am about the things facing them as they age and as those of us parents can no longer be there for them.
Julie Salamonski, and I'm a retired special ed teacher and autism consultant. And after having worked with a lot of students with autism, my passion is to be involved in the community, and I'm a board member. I'm the secretary for E.N.C. right now. And so my passion is to do education for the community because I think autism is very much misunderstood. And so Kathy and I are creating this affordable community, an intergenerational community, and we both retired on the same day, so we're bringing our efforts together to try to build it.
Okay, tell us about the concept with the community.
Well, the concept is built on several things. One is that we all know health-wise, I'm a retired physician, and health-wise, we now know that loneliness is as hard on your health as a half a pack of cigarettes a day. So these two populations, both our aging population and our autistic population, are both at high risk for loneliness. Those with autism are socially impaired, and those seniors have had enough changes in their lives that they're no longer as engaged. Many of them, not all of them, but many are not as engaged. They may have lost a spouse, other family changes that have left them alone. And so that is the beginning of the concept. Now, we saw a concept of a community out in Massachusetts where they brought seniors together with families who are adopting children who have experienced foster care. So they have an educated senior population who understands about the experiences, the trauma and childhood trauma that these children have had, and help overcome those and establish long-term relationships that these children have been missing. So their success rate has been 95% graduation rate from high school and 100% of those going on to secondary learning, which is a very different profile from the typical children who are in our foster care system. So we think this model would be an excellent model for autism and also for aging. And we believe that aging, the other issue is that many people are not engaged in community and are lacking a purposeful life. And most people, they're studying now that doing good is actually good for your health. And so having that opportunity immediately out your door in a community, we think is important to the health of all. Now, why does autism need more support in the greater community than other disabilities? Well, they think completely differently, and they can be misinterpreted, and most of them will never be able to self-advocate. It's just part of the autism thing. And so basically, for example, a young man over in a nearby county last summer, he'd been living independently with support from his family. He'd lived in an apartment for 3 years, had a job, until he was arrested for cutting the cords on the vacuum cleaners for the second time. And those of us who live with autism say, why did it happen the second time? Because cutting it the first time, those of us would have understood the sensory issues of autism, which they hear things differently than we do. They're triggered by different things than we are. Sort of like some people are triggered by scratches on a chalkboard. Not that there are many chalkboards left these days, but that's, for some people, that's something that can throw them off. But anyway, this young man, fortunately the judge recognized that he was not competent, but he did lose his housing. And so people with autism are at high risk for homelessness or incarceration if they don't have advocates. So we want to build a neighborhood of advocacy. Mm-hmm. And also we see that as a mutual benefit for seniors who need to build a new sort of family or tribe.
So it's sort of like the Tiny Tigers Intergenerational Center, but that's more of a daytime thing. This would be a community centered around that 24 hours a day, correct?
Right, but it would go further than just sharing time together, because there's some options that are not widespread that we would like to see more teaching and more opportunities to build supports that will help when parents are gone. That is, one of the biggest concerns those of us parents have when we aren't in the picture anymore to advocate is who will step into our shoes. Now, there's an interesting structure out of Canada that's 20 years old now, and that's called a microboard. There is a microboard association here in Wisconsin, and what a microboard is where you can form a not-for-profit company around a person with a disability. And you have board members that, just like any other company, where they have, it's a team, and also they have terms, and so you would have a flow of people through, and in theory it would be self-perpetuating. So you could have people who are sort of like guardian angels that would meet 4 times a year to make sure that they're negotiating with social services okay, and managing without actually handling the money, and seeing to that person's welfare. And so you can see that even a senior who can't get around very well can do something that's really, really important in someone else's life.
So your son is now in his 20s?
He's 25, yes.
And when was he diagnosed?
He was diagnosed when he was 3 years and 3 months.
Can you kind of take us through the journey with autism and the challenges and learning? It's bewildering. We noticed differences in him from the time he was 2. He used his language differently. For example, he would say, "Want to see Daddy turn on the snowblower?" And we're all sitting on the sofa. And there wasn't new snow or anything, and I didn't understand. But later, when I understood about autism, I understood because he memorized a whole soundbite instead of word by word. He meant he wanted to look out the front window, because that's what I had said when I took up to the front window the previous time. So, as a toddler, there were these bewildering behaviors, and my husband and I, we would try asking him questions, and we would ask him a question, and he would just laugh and smile and be charming. Well, that was his cover-up. He didn't know what we wanted, and he couldn't answer any questions. So even at his 3-year-old visit, now he was our oldest, even at his 3-year-old visit, he couldn't answer any questions, and we were told, we'll give it time. And so it wasn't until we took him to a young preschool for those who were turned 3 after September 1st, that the teachers there said, you really need to have him evaluated. And so of course we did, and that's when we got his diagnosis. So as time went on, it's always bewildering, it's always unexpected. You never know what's going to happen. We joke about, I talk about writing a book of high adventure parenting, because it's even now it is really, really unpredictable from minute to minute what's going to happen. So, for example, kindergarten orientation, we had him go through kindergarten twice, particularly because conveniently the first year was half days, and the second year they went to full-day kindergarten. And because his main deficit was social, the only grade that you really have a strongly social curriculum is kindergarten. So I remember a parent saying to me when they were holding their child back that the teachers were concerned, well, he'll stick out, when he gets older. And it's like, my kid has autism. You can't make them stick out any more than that. So, you kind of blow away the fears of, what does it matter in the long run, when already socially they're not likely to be someone who fits in well. So we're going to our second kindergarten orientation, and our main goal is we are going to go up and greet the teacher. And of course it's one of those hot August days, everybody's sweating, the box fans are everywhere, and there's parents with their first child going to school, and other ones where it's the third one, and we go in, and the teacher's up there at the desk, and I have Matt by the shoulders because he's a slippery guy who gets away from me easily. We get up there, and just before we're ready to greet him, he takes both of his index fingers, pokes them straight into the fan, and then straight up his nose, and I have a bleeding, screaming child in kindergarten orientation. Now, fortunately, the teacher knew him, and I have only the most wonderful praise for Jane Cooper. And I just said to Jane, do you think we should do a self-portrait at home?
oh yeah, I think that would be a great idea. And, I grabbed a few tissues and we were out of there. But it's just an example of how just unpredictable. And of course, I joked that, fingers, nose, I'm a plastic surgeon, I can handle this. But nothing was really damaged, and I knew that probably was. But anyway, it's just, he reacted to whatever in the area, and they don't react the same way we do. And sometimes it can be inadvertently self-injurious, but I like to explain to people that, what is overload that they experience so readily? Well, have you ever had stage fright? Most people can identify with having stage fright. And so that's, when you have stage fright, you lose your words, you can't speak, you get wobbly knees, and some people will faint dead away. Hyperventilate, and any number of reactions that neurotypical people have. Well, with autism, there's a whole range of things that at that point they cannot think clearly, and there's different things that will put them into overload.
Lighting like this.
Right, lighting like this would be too much. For some people, they describe, some high-functioning people, if they go into a mall and there's just too many lit signs, they have fainted. They always go with friends who can get them out of there, but they can faint dead away. So each person is individually very, very different, and that's why they call it a spectrum. So one of the challenges in our housing model is we know we're not designing housing for everybody on the autism spectrum. There isn't any such thing. We need different models so that people can find the housing that works for them. But as Matt got older, he was initially, included in regular classrooms, but it became clear that he wasn't enjoying that and he wasn't getting anything out of that. And he always did better in a very quiet environment, one-on-one. He just could never handle a lot of other people around him. And one of his triggers is people coughing or now people sniffing. And so if you so much as clear your throat like that, you're busted. Did you cough? And then you have to apologize or tell them that, oh yes, I warned you, whether you did or you didn't, but there's this whole ritual that you need to do for that. So the more people present, it's like a minefield for him. So he gets very uneasy and nervous and tends to flee situations where there's too many people. So he also, the other thing is a little bit stronger noise, but similar in that it's a concussive noise, is cars starting. So parking lots are really tough on him. And he's terrified, and he will dash across parking lots without looking. He will dash across 4-lane highways without looking. He's not safe near a street. And I can't tell you how many millions of times we've done the rehearsal of look left and look right.
Safety program,
right.
The cones,
yes,
the orange cones.
Yeah, everything. So he's not safe near a roadway. We live at a dead-end road down a quarter-mile long driveway, and every now and then he still has managed to get out to the street. Fortunately, it's not a busy street, and neighbors know that he shouldn't be out there by himself. So now at 25, he's not safe in the greater community. He can't live in an apartment complex. I like to describe that he walks like Tigger. He bounces and flaps, especially when he's excited. And he also, many people with autism have sleeping disorders. So this can be at any hour of the night, and he vocalizes too. He's like full of joy, all the way overflowing, but it's not something that most people are going to want to hear at 2 or 4 in the morning. So, the apartment building is just out of the question. And also, I always thought that maybe by the time he was 25, he could handle having a housemate or roommate, but that is probably it's not in the near future, certainly. So that's kind of where we are, and that's a lot of the journey, but learning to accept that he's doing his best. And I think some of the lessons that I've learned is that you have to look at when someone is doing their best. None of us can do better than our best. And so trying to understand what he's capable of and not capable of, even in that moment of, is he approaching overload, or is he calm and collected? And that's, the key to working with people with autism is kind of understanding where are they in their functioning. We all have good days and bad days, but we can kind of look at Yeah,
Yeah.
but we can also recognize, oh God, I need a cup of coffee, but they have trouble with that self-regulation of recognizing how they're feeling and then reacting to that. And so basically many of them live in the moment in that respect, and so aren't as, it's one of the weaker areas that they have, although even in autism, it varies from individual to individual how weak they are in some of that.
Julie, can you speak to some of the students with autism that you've worked with over the years and their challenges?
Sure, and like Kathy said, they're also different. And one of the things that we did when I happened to work with Deb Benish when I was an autism consultant, she was very knowledgeable about what needed to be in place for these students. And so we implemented visual schedules, structure, foreshadowing, and we would do a sensory profile, sensory diet, which the OTs, the occupational therapists, had a part of too. They were very knowledgeable in that area. So we would all work as a team for what was best for the student. And so for instance, they would start their day, they would have a very structured schedule that was foreshadowed. They would know exactly what their day was going to look like. And if they would know when they were going to have a break, and they would have break choices. We would have pictures, and they could actually choose what they would like to do for a break. And those that had heightened sensory, maybe sensory defensiveness, where one thing would trigger them, we would have it in place where they could either put headphones on, or they could listen to music, or they could do some type of mindfulness or something like that. So it just depended on from student to student. The other thing that we noticed too is the rigid diets that they have. A lot of students with autism have just maybe 3 or 4 things that they really like to eat. And so it's just very unusual. And so we would be very careful about, what snacks that they would have at school. And then for some severe behavior, we would do what's called a functional behavior assessment, or an FBA, where the team would come together and we would take data on what happened before the behavior, what the behavior looked like in a description, and then what would happen afterwards, and what was done as a staff reaction, to dealing with that behavior. And then we would come together as a team to try to determine what the purpose of that behavior was. And it's a very structured process that the school district uses to determine what can be in place for that student. And then we would write a behavior plan as a result of that. So everybody on the team would know what that student needs specifically to get through their day. And sometimes they would need a shortened day because they wouldn't be able to they just didn't have the capacity to be regulated all day for 6 hours. So they would have a shortened day. That's not uncommon. So it can be complicated, but I always felt like everything was a team decision, and there was a lot of support by the team. You have a lot of students who have the disability of autism have a whole team. They have an occupational therapist, they might have a physical therapist, they have a speech and language pathologist, they have a special education teacher, they have a regular education teacher, and then they usually have some advocates in the community, either through their home therapy program or social services, or somebody who can join in on the IEP team. So it like Kathy said, for the adults, for the multi-generational community, she talked about microboards. And so the IEP team, the microboard is kind of like an extension of the IEP team in their youth. And the microboard is now going to support them as an adult.
So it sounds like structure and routine are very important.
Yes.
in their
Yes,
lives.
yes.
Could we talk a little bit about invisible supports?
Would you like to take that one? Do you mean, I'm not sure what
Well,
you
the
mean.
support that that they might have behind the scenes.
Okay, yeah, I have kind of labeled that artificial independence, because behind the scenes, families are doing a lot of things, including the groceries, including, inspecting whether there's spoiled food, cleaning the homes, other things that something happens to the parents and that's going to drop out, and so they're not truly independent. So there isn't really a plan for that. So that's some of the concerns that we have about the independence of these people, is what happens when the parents are no longer there to do these things behind the scene. And many can't self-modulate, so if you drop off a half gallon of ice cream, it will probably all get eaten at one time for some of our loved ones. So there's just ways that even doling out things that has to be done so that they take care of themselves, because that's just not in their awareness or their capabilities to self-monitor that way.
And for people who don't know about a lot about autism, they could see this adult in a setting, like at a party or at a social event, and say, oh, well, they've got a lot of skills, they're doing great, but they have no idea what supports have been in place for them to get to that point. And so
and I would say also that some of them get a level of self-awareness that when they're in those particular situations, they can suppress some of their autistic features, because they are that self-aware. But then oftentimes when they leave that, then the stress, they need more rituals, they need more things that, a lot of the rituals are a way of calming. And so they will act out for parents or other people, just like regular children will test their parents because they know their parents will never give up on them. And so their behaviors will be worse than they are in public. So we see that, and the problem with autism is that some of the social services and other people who work with these individuals don't really get the whole picture and see the parents as the enemy. And so that's really tough. So there's a lot of things that we see is in building a community that understands this, and you get that comfort level, then you can really see and get to know that individual, and that helps support them in the long run.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what led to the vision of the community and more details on what exactly the community is.